What's going on, everyone? We are going to recap the All-American Bowl the Navy All-American Bowl here just to talk. This is horrible. This has been a great way to start this video. All right. That's Austin. I'm Matt. We're going to recap the Navy All-American Bowl right after this. Austin Nace and Matt Bruening here. Excited to actually bring you the Navy All-American Bowl. I don't think we actually did this last year, but we're going to talk about how some of the 2025 and 2026 recruiting players looked in that. I guess it's an all-star game is what you would call it. If you guys like what we are doing here at Camps to Canton, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. We are trying to get to 5,000 subs by the start of the college football season. We appreciate your guys' help in spreading the good word of college fantasy football around this beautiful nation. Austin, much like my butchered opening to this show, I would say that the game was very much like that as well. It was not a typically or overall exciting game. The West did beat the East 13-7. To kind of do the show, we're just really going to stick about talking with the teams. Let's start with the East side. Since they did only put up the one touchdown, it was a pass from Ty Hawkins to Jamie French. Let's stick with the quarterbacks first. Well, we'll break it down by position. What did you think about the East sides here? Their quarterbacks, again, Ty Hawkins, who's in the 2025 class, he is going to SMU. He is what I believe the number 5 quarterback in the class. Antoine Hill Jr., who is also in that class, going to Memphis. And you have Bo Bentley, who is in the 2026 class from Salina, Texas, who is currently uncommitted. What were your overall thoughts on those 3 players?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of rough. I guess Bentley, I'm not that deep into next year's 2026 class at all. They were saying that he basically, last year was his first year starting. He didn't really come into the week with a lot of offers, but I guess through practice and stuff, Arizona offered him. He'd been talking to Georgia, now some other schools. The commentary group comped him to Kate Klubnik, I think at one point. And I didn't think that was a terrible comparison, a little bit undersized. The arm didn't wow me as I was watching, but, all-star setting, whatever. It's kind of tough to say at times. But I didn't think he was particularly great in this game. I didn't think Antoine Hill was great. He took a bunch of really bad sacks in the drives he was in. They were just kind of drive killer. It was really hard to get him going and get the other guys going and kind of watch the drives he was in. It just didn't seem like he had great pocket awareness, maybe wasn't just quite used to the level of pass rushers that were coming at him. Ty Hawkins was fine. I mean, it's just really hard in this setting where these guys don't have a lot of rapport with the receivers. This is really a scaled down playbook. I don't even know how many plays they really have installed for these kinds of things. It can't be that many. But I will say for both teams, actually, the quarterbacks just didn't really blow me away at all outside of like a handful of throws maybe between the groups.
Yeah, that's fair. I actually thought Bentley in moments looked like the best out of the 3 quarterbacks. He had a throw up the middle of the field, and I believe it was to Watkins that was dropped. I thought he placed perfectly on his hand, stepped up in the pocket to avoid a rush on that. A little bit of like a sidearm throw was in the 3rd quarter, I believe is what it was.
It was to Gregory, the Texas A&M commits, who I actually haven't really watched a ton of. But yeah, it was a bad drop. It was a nice throw.
Yeah. Outside of that, on that side, I think he had the best throw. On the East side, Hawkins gets the touchdown to Jamie French. Should have had 2. Let's start there. Hawkins should have had 2 touchdowns. He had a bomb down the field that was dropped. That one maybe was to Watkins, and I think was a horrible throw. Yes, it was a horrible throw.
That was to French because I have a note here. I said terrible throw, and Jamie French dropped it. Like the whole thing was bad. I don't know what either of them were doing.
So we can get to the French side of that when we talked about the wide receivers. But yes, I agree. That was on both of them, horrible on both parts. Like French could have caught that, but it was a horrible. I mean, French was wide open, and he just completely underthrew that. There was no reason for that. And then I even think on the touchdown throw, it was a clear blown coverage. Jamie French was running wide open there in the 4th quarter. And then Jamie French still had to like run and turn around and stop and like almost step backwards to get the ball. Like, it's just Ty Hawkins. I believe I'm the highest on him on the recruiting team with my grade. This was a very unimpressive performance to me, especially from a guy coming out of IMG Academy who, yeah, we knew he was a little bit raw at the quarterback position, but like everything they talked about this year with him being at IMG and the steps he was taking forward and what they thought he could be, I don't love him going into SMU looking this way. I really thought he had a chance to kind of separate himself with this all-star game and the practices and everything. And to me, he was better than Antoine Hill Jr., but I would say overall, when I go back and look at the notes I have for the West team and the East team quarterbacks, I mean, I'd say I have multiple quarterbacks over him. Like, I was really, really disappointed. I think Grady Adamson had some decent throws. I actually really like what Keyshawn Henderson did on the West team. And like I said, I think Bentley was the better quarterback on the East team. So I'd have had Ty Hawkins as like my fourth quarterback on the day for the game. It's just not an impressive performance to me.
Yeah, and we have Ty Hawkins right now as our quarterback 16 in the class, one spot behind Antoine Hill, actually. And then just looking at the grades that we have on him right now, you are the only person who has him as a tier 2 player.
Yeah.
You have him barely in there, like just right in the cusp. And then big wide receiver guy Matt and I have him tier 3. I have him draftable in both supplementals and startup drafts. Matt has him just draftable in startup drafts. So, yeah, we're a little lower on him, and I think we saw some of the growing pains. But I mean, yeah, SMU playing in the ACC, he's not going to play next year, so maybe he can work on some of that stuff for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Moving on over to the running backs, you had Sean Alston out of Ohio, who's currently uncommitted. Deshaun Foster out of Louisiana, who committed during the game. I, for the life of me, cannot remember who he ended up going to now. I thought I had written that
ULM,
down.
I believe. Isn't he the one who said he wanted to be the next Ahmad Hardy?
Yeah.
Is like completely inappropriate in my opinion, but whatever.
Yeah. And then the last one, who you're a big fan of, out of Tennessee, Shakai Mills Knight, who is going to Ole Miss.
Yeah, so Did Alston commit to this game as well? Is he the one that committed to USC during the game? Yeah, he is. He did. Okay. He committed to USC earlier in that one, which I thought was interesting. He's an Ohio kid. They don't recruit California that well, but they're pulling these kids. They got Harry Dalton out of Virginia or whatever this year. They got him out of Ohio. Very interesting. I'm not sure what the connection is there. I mean, it much like the quarterbacks, I think it's kind of tough for traditional running backs to kind of stand out in these games. Some of these guys that are a little more space players maybe can be a little more interesting. That's why a couple of years ago, Rayshawn Luke in one of the 2 high school All-Star game had like a really good game because they were like, kind of throwing him screens and getting him out in space and stuff. And he impressed. But I did think, and I am a fan of this player, but I thought Shakai Mills Knight looked pretty decent in this one. At the first drive of the game, right off the bat, they gave him a carry, there really wasn't anything there. He picked up 5 or 6, like one of those that he kind of really squeezed everything he could have, all the juice out of that one. And then very next play, they threw him a screen. He didn't have a ton of receiving work on his high school tape, so that was really interesting to me. Looked very comfortable. It actually wasn't – the throw was altered a little bit, went up, got it, brought it down real quick, and got upfield, picked up 10, 12, 15 yards. Had another couple of longer runs in the second half. I thought he was good. He's going to Ole Miss there. He's over 210 pounds. Like, he's a thicker guy. We've got him with a really good athleticism score. I think we've got him like an 80th something percentile speed score. I think if he shows that he can do the receiving stuff consistently, this is a kid who can play by sophomore year at Ole Miss and be really, really good there. And I don't think Lane Kiffin is afraid of playing younger guys, especially at some of these positions where maybe age and experience matter a little bit less. So I think he kind of reaffirmed what I thought about him. And I've been not necessarily on an island in our group, but I think I'm definitely the highest guy on him in our team. So, and I think what I saw, I'm going to keep him there. And Ford, I wasn't that familiar with, didn't really do anything in this game outside of committing, but that was super interesting. And then Alston's a 2026 kid, so I really wasn't critically watching him. I don't like that the 2026 kids are there. I'm not a huge fan of that.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. I mean, so we were texting a little bit during the game, and I was like, man, which again we'll get to when we get to the West team's quarterbacks. I was like, I really liked what Henderson did at times in this game. And then you're like, wait, who is this? I was like, as I texted you, I didn't realize 2026 guys were in this game. And you told me they were also in the All-Star game that happened previously. Was that last week or 2 weeks ago? So yeah, I'm with you. I don't like that either. It's always typically been the class that is coming up into college football that are going to be incoming freshmen. And so that's kind of what I was expecting. So on Shakai Mills-Knight, who I agree with you, I thought was the best running back on the east side here. We have him at a .928 athlete, 21.2 miles per hour. So very good athleticism score. And I thought was the best running back on the day. He had a couple runs in that, I believe it was in the third quarter, that were really impressive, like really good runs that he took easily 10 to 12 yards on each of them. I'm going to be honest, I didn't see much at all from Ford. I did not I didn't put anything in my notes about him. Like, he just did not stand out to me at all. I actually thought Alston in the second quarter had a couple decent runs, like nothing that like stood out massively to me. Again, Mills-Knight was by far the best, but there was one run in the second quarter. I believe it was like right before, or maybe in a couple plays before he threw, Henderson threw that touchdown, or it might have been the drive before. He had like a nice run up the middle, and I thought it was Mills-Knight who actually did it until I saw it was number 21. I was like, oh, who is this? And I had to go look it up to see that it was Alston. But I thought he had a couple impressive runs in this one as well. Again, it's something we will be diving more into is that 2026 class now once we finish up the 2023 freshman supplemental guide and everything. We start transitioning over to the 2026 class. But he's a guy that I will look into because I thought he was impressive. And in my opinion, I would guess the reason these 2026 guys are here at this game is because they were so impressive in their now junior seasons going into their senior year. So these guys will be on my radar a little bit more than maybe they would have typically been. Going over to the wide receiver. Well, do you want to touch on the tight ends at all? I mean, Lincoln Cure, James Flanagan were on the east side here. I honestly didn't write anything down.
I don't even know if they were targeted. I really don't know. So I don't have any notes on either of them. Yeah. I've got the other tight ends and the other team each caught a pass or two, but neither of these guys did. Yeah.
Which sucks because we're like massive fans of Lincoln Cure. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't even realize he was on the East team because he just, from what I remember, did nothing. Like, I'm with you. I have nothing in my notes about him. So it'd have been nice to see them possibly feature him a little bit more. The east side wide receivers, you had Quincy Porter out of New Jersey going to Ohio State, Winston Watkins out of Florida going to Ole Miss, Jamie French out of Florida going to Texas, Cortez Mills Jr. out of Florida going to Nebraska, Aaron Gregory, a 2026 commit out of Georgia going to Texas A&M, Jabari Brady, 2026 commit, who is currently uncommitted, as is Cameron Sparks, who's in the 2025 class, Devin Carter.
Sparks committed on the day.
Oh, okay.
He committed to Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech, gotcha. And then Devin Carter, 2026, committed to Auburn. I did see that one. I'm going to be honest, I skipped. I didn't watch it 100%, so I skipped over a lot of the commitment stuff as I was trying to watch the game. And then Devin Carter out of Georgia, who also committed to Auburn. What were your takeaways from the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough in the game setting. Really, like the negative, it kind of stands out more than the positive. Jamie French, as we talked about earlier, had that really bad drop on what was a busted coverage. Like, he just ran wide open downfield. It wasn't like he did anything to get himself open, just ran. I guess what they were saying was maybe supposed to be a post. He just looks like he was running a go. Yeah. For some reason, the safety jumped the shorter route, and he just ran like wide open. I don't know exactly what the deal was there. I take away more from this game what happened in the practices, and I did get to watch a lot of the 1v1s from this week. They put a lot of them up on YouTube or other places, and then reading some of the reports of people who were there. And it sounds like of the group, really, Quincy Porter was kind of like the guy in this group during the week that was the most impressive. So a guy that I actually bumped up a little bit just based on that and what he looked like in some of the clips that I saw. I did bump Jamie French down a little bit because it sounds like he wasn't really particularly strong during the week. Yeah. And then the other one, Winston Watkins Jr., his 1v1 stuff, he seems like he's more of a gadgety guy to me. I don't know that he's a great receiver right now. I don't have him currently as draftable in rookie or in supplemental drafts or startups. But he did do some stuff. He was back returning the kicks and the punts. He took an end around at one point and broke, like a 15, 20-yard run on that. But wasn't that impressive as like a receiver. So I didn't really know what to take away from him really in his performance, other than like he's probably a pretty good athlete, but I don't know how good of a receiver he is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. It's kind of hard to take away anything positive. I mean, I will say that on the it was one of the first drives. Ty Hawkins hit Quincy Porter on what was like a little comeback route. He got it and then took it for a couple more yards. It was a nice play. And then there wasn't really much of him after that. Jamie French, both plays, right? The touchdown he scored in the fourth quarter, broken coverage, and then the one in the first quarter. It would have been, I'm almost positive it was on the first drive of the game. Again, he just dropped it. Again, definitely a lot on Ty Hawkins for just a bad pass. But I mean, at the end of the day, it wasn't like French had to dive for the ball or anything. He just had to like lean down and it hit him in the hands. Like he could have caught it. Would have been a walk-in touchdown for him as well. And as you mentioned, there's just been a lot of talk about how he has been in practices this week. And we even had Alan True on. It was kind of hinting about that on Wednesday, saying, Khalil Lockett is the guy that he thought was going to be better anyways. And it seems like a lot of the services feel that Khalil Lockett would be a better wide receiver than Jamie French. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. I believe I'm still the highest on Jamie French on our team. I still like him. But again, a lot of the reports this week and then what we saw in the game wasn't overall flattering. But again, we want to give that qualifier that have only been practicing for a week. There's probably limited plays and all this stuff. And, as you mentioned with the broken play touchdown that French scored, it sounds like that was the same play as well with the other thing. They were saying he was, and it was even actually the touchdown that Henderson threw. If you watch the interview that he did with Cooper, he said that he thought Cooper was supposed to run like a curl route. And the next thing you know, he's all the way down the field wide open. And Cooper even said, I just hope he sees me. So it was just like one of those things where it seems like there was a few busted coverages in this one. That's how the touchdowns were scored. It's just a weird thing. It seems like the defense has dominated this game where typically you see the offense at least usually have some decent explosive plays. I have no – go ahead. Yeah.
And maybe that makes sense because we've talked about this a lot, that we don't think this is a particularly good running back class. We don't think it's a particularly good wide receiver class. And of the top quarterbacks, I mean, our as a group, our highest rated guy that was at this game is is Antoine Hill at QB 15. Yeah. Like none of like the really top guys that we like in this class participated in this game. So, I guess it makes sense, but I do think, and there's probably gonna be a theme when we talk about all this stuff all off season, like this just isn't that great of a class. Does that mean that guys can't come out of the woodwork or just completely kind of flip our expectations for what we have for them coming in? Sure. But I mean, right now, I don't feel comfortable drafting a lot of these guys at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I would say we'll talk about a decent amount of them here that are on the West team, but like Alvin Henderson, Khalil Lockett, probably Jamie French, and Shakai Mills-Knight are probably our highest rated players. I don't remember if Taylor's up there. I know he had a great week, and I thought made a great catch in the game as well. Like, there's just not a lot of those top players, at least that we have graded. Obviously, some of these guys are fairly high for some of the services, but the players we thought, at least so far, we thought were going to be very good. Any other thoughts on the East team, or should we move on to the West team?
No, I didn't have really any other guys in my notes. I mean, I just I broke it out. I literally watched the game and did every single drive and like all the interesting plays. And I just have QB messes it up, QB messes it up, QB messes it up. So just overall that really was limiting on the day, I think.
Yeah. All right. So on the West team, sticking with the quarterbacks, Grady Adamson going to Georgia Tech. He is out of Oklahoma. Noah Grubbs is a 2026 commit going to Notre Dame. And then Keyshawn Henderson, also a 2026 recruit out of the Legacy School of Sports Sciences in Texas. Never heard of this. And he is actually listed as the top athlete, is a top 15 recruit in the nation, at least according to On3 when I looked him up. But he is committed currently to Houston. Again, I thought he was, I tweeted out, I thought he was the most impressive player of the game. I actually think he won the Offensive Player of the Game award. What were your overall takeaways from these three guys on the West team that did, again, win the game 13-7?
Yeah, I thought Grubbs was really, really bad.
I agree.
I thought he was probably the worst quarterback on the day. He's 26 kid, young, maybe some nerves. Ball placement was really erratic. I didn't think his pocket presence was particularly strong.
He took a lot of bad sacks. A lot of bad sacks from that one.
He did. I thought Grubbs was pretty clearly the worst quarterback. He really didn't look like he belonged in this game at all. I'm actually somewhat of a big Grady and Adamson fan. I actually didn't realize I'm the highest on him in our group by a pretty decent amount. I have him draftable in both supplementals and startup drafts. Barely, but I've got him in that range, going to Georgia Tech, probably sit a year behind Haynes King and then be in the mix. After that, I think he's Pretty good athlete, good arm, just kind of one of those fun guys that I think I'm not really thinking NFL future per se, but for college, I think he can be a pretty good quarterback. And Georgia Tech's kind of building something over there actually. If anyone's been paying attention to what they're doing right now.
They have a very highly ranked recruiting class this year. It's like a ranked recruiting class. Yeah.
Flipped some guys from like Clemson and a couple SEC schools late, a couple of 4-star, high 3-star guys. So I like Adamson, and I thought he had a couple of decent plays. Really the only thing that he did on the day that was that I have a negative on, he at one point pressure came off the edges, both of them, and he tried to step up in the pocket and step right into the back of his center or guard or whoever and fumbled it. But they did recover it. So I guess it didn't end up killing him too bad. But that was really the only takeaway I had from the 2025 guys. Yeah, I thought Keyshawn Henderson, they were saying that some schools don't want him as a quarterback, but I definitely thought he showed enough that made me think that he's a quarterback long term there. And they're saying, maybe safety, maybe a receiver or something like that. But good arm. The touchdown that he threw, it wasn't like the best pass ever. For anybody saw, he kind of had to, avoid pressure, stepped up, stepped to the left, and then reset his feet and got the ball downfield pretty quickly. Quick release, reset himself really quickly. He looked like a quarterback on that play. So I think he's going to be really, really interesting. I like the Legacy School of Sports Sciences. That homeschool, I mean, seriously, I don't know. What is this? But I thought he was like very clearly the best quarterback on either team on the day. Yeah, I agree.
I'll go. I agree with you on Grubbs. Is not impressive at all, and I was kind of like shocked again because when I was watching him, because he actually got on the field, I believe, before Henderson did as well.
Yeah, he was the first quarterback on the field. I was like, oh, cool. This guy must be real good if they got him out there.
And then I saw the committed to Notre Dame thing, and I was like, man, I don't know how. Because again, at that point when I was watching, I did not realize the 2026 guys were in there. So I was like, how did I miss this guy in my grades for 2025? I was like, oh, we'll just watch him now. And then I was like, wow, this is not good. I actually agree with you on Adamson. I thought that he looked really good. There was a couple of times that he doesn't. What was it? He rolled. There was a play where he avoided the pressure, rolled out to the left, and fired like a really nice sideline pass, which I thought was really impressive. Again, the only negative I have on him was the fumble. And I don't know how much he put on that. He was clearly, as you said, trying to avoid the sack. He just literally ran into his offensive line. You could see him. It just looked like a weird thing because the ball went, and you could see him trying to reach around the offensive lineman to try and grab the ball. But overall, I thought he actually played really well. Henderson had ups and downs in this game too, though. But he had I really thought that the touchdown pass was impressive with the way he avoided the sack. Then, as you mentioned, he rolled out to the left. And not only so here's the one thing I do have an issue with this, and I don't know if you saw this too, if you have a chance to go back and watch it. He reset his feet, but then he almost did like a jump pass. He did not keep his feet planted when he passed the ball, which I thought was weird. Again, it didn't really matter because it was Cooper, right? Cooper's wide. I mean, he was wide open running down the field. I will say, it hit him in stride. To me, it was a better pass than Ty Hawkins because Ty Hawkins, both times, French was wide open and it was poor throws. At least Cooper didn't have to turn around for it or anything like that. But he did have a couple other plays just using his legs that make me excited to see what he does. He's on my radar now to see kind of what he does in the 2026 high school season as a senior. And then if he stays committed to Houston, as we were texting back and forth, I think Baylor and Arizona State are the other two teams that offered him that, but he ended up again signed with Houston right now. Would not be surprised if after this game, maybe he gets a little bit more interest from some other schools if they want him to be quarterback. I'm with you. I don't see why you'd want him to play safety. I thought he played really well from just a quarterback perspective today.
Yep. Completely agree.
From the running backs, we have Alvin Henderson, is a 2025 running back recruit out of Alabama. Again, fairly well known at this point for breaking all the records that Derrick Henry set, including multiple years with 50-plus rushing touchdowns. He is signed with Auburn. You have, is it Devarian Gross? Or Davian
I think that's
Gross,
how they were saying. They were saying Gross during the game. So,
okay.
Yeah.
He's a 2026 running back out of Texas who I'm saying uncommitted. Did he commit during the thing? And I didn't watch any. The only one I saw was Carter.
I don't think he did. No.
And then Jermico Green out of Texas as well, who is signed with SMU. Your takeaways from these three?
Yeah, it was tough. I don't really even remember Alvin Henderson getting any touches.
Yeah.
I don't even know if he actually played in this game.
He did.
Okay,
It
I just
wasn't
don't remember.
impressive. Yeah, it wasn't impressive, unfortunately.
And again, it's tough for some of these running backs, especially kind of traditional running backs like Henderson. I thought Jermichael Green actually had a couple of decent runs. He's the only guy that I really had any sort of positive notes down on. He was picking up decent chunk yardage every single time they gave him the ball. Going to SMU there, I think we like that spot for him.
Yeah.
Just looking real quick at our group rankings, looks like Matt Pal and I are the only two that have grades on him, but we both think he's draftable in supplementals and startups. So our RB, let's see here, our RB 18 overall. But within a tier, he's so close to a bunch of other guys that really you could put him up to like RB 14, 15. So I think he'll be a guy that you can target late in supplementals this year. Decent size. He'll be over 200 pounds. I think he can catch the ball a little bit. We have him as a pretty good athlete. So, but yeah, he's the only one that I really had any sort of positive notes down on the day. The West team didn't really run the ball particularly effectively throughout this one.
Yeah, their offensive line seemed to get blown up a little bit, which I think is probably what hurt Alvin Henderson. We have him obviously as a great athlete in this one. We have a .918 athlete score, 21.6 miles per hour, so just barely ahead of Shalik Mills-Knight, who we just talked about on the east side, miles per hour wise at least. Alvin Henderson, I think the biggest thing that's kind of been critical of him is he doesn't have any, at least from my opinion, patience behind the line. And the few runs that he had, and this one specifically in the second half, were like straight almost right into where the defense was coming. And like he would just run right in. He didn't allow his blocks to develop or anything like that. He didn't even try and push it outside. He just ran straight into where the run was going to go. And he just didn't go anywhere. I think the longest run he had was maybe 6 yards, and it was not impressive. Now I'm a big fan of Alvin Henderson, just from like an explosive athlete perspective, but I think the lack of patience and some of that vision kind of showed in this game, because there was a couple times I felt like if he would have bounced it back to the opposite side of the field, or maybe even tried to push the run outside, he might have gotten a bigger play out of it, but he just kind of tried to run it up the middle. I had on my notes that Green had a couple impressive runs. I'll be honest, I did not even realize Gross did. I don't know if he did much. I didn't put anything down for him. So like nothing, unfortunately, he did kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that's how you spelled his last name. I was just writing out like GROSS in my things, but
yeah.
I didn't have I have 2 notes on him. They're just short runs. He didn't do anything particularly impressive. So yeah.
The tight ends on the west side here: Keoti Armstrong out of Texas, going to Texas A&M, and then Caleb Edwards out of California, who signed with Alabama. Again, they did actually get some work compared to the east side. Your thoughts on those two?
Yeah, they both had a catch or two. I have not graded either of these players yet. I'm through about 10 tight ends. These are not 2 of them, and that's because they aren't, at least in our database, elite athletes. And for me, basically the tight ends I watch first are the elite athletes, and then I'll watch kind of the top ranked guys after that aren't, elite in our database. And I think noticeably Armstrong was laboring a little bit. Like he had a pass where he just kind of, opened in the flat, caught it, got upfield, 8, 9, 10-yard gain, but didn't look like anything particularly explosive there. Edwards did look a little like he was moving pretty well in the 1 or 2 times he was targeted. So interesting on both. I actually was really hoping to see more of Tiandre Waverly in this one, who I think will probably be a tight end at the next level. Mm-hmm. He's like, I know he's listed, I think it's like a wide receiver on the stuff they put out, but he's like 6'3.5", 225. We have him as a tight end. We think he'll be a tight end. I didn't hear his name at all in this one. When I was watching, I don't remember him doing anything. He did commit to Oregon State at the beginning of this. That's about the only note I had for him. And I mean, I guess from like a playtime perspective, that's awesome, but not really a place that I want a lot of recruits to go at the moment. I just don't really know what's next for them. So tough to really evaluate any of the tight ends in this one, but at least, a couple of these guys got catches, so we could say something about them.
Yeah, on the wide receiver side, we mentioned Khalil Lockett earlier, was on this side here, out of Texas, going to Texas. You had Jalen Cooper, who scored the touchdown out of Texas, going to SMU. Jordan Clay, who is the only 2026 wide receiver on this roster, who is currently uncommitted out of Texas. Taylon Taylor, out of Illinois going to Georgia, Andrew Marsh out of Texas going to Michigan, Dalen McCutcheon out of Texas going to Texas, and then as you just mentioned, Tiandre Waverly out of Washington now going to Oregon State. I'll say that I thought Taylor Taylor was the best. I know Cooper got the touchdown, but I thought Taylor was running some very good routes. Obviously made a couple good catches in this one. But who impressed you overall? What were your thoughts on the wide receiver group here for the West?
Yeah, it sounds like Taylor was pretty impressive all week in practice, and then he had one catch that I had noted specifically on a little bit of a broken play, kind of running some sort of a crosser, came across, pass was a little bit high, good extension, got upfield quickly after, picked up some nice yardage there. I think he's going to be really, really interesting at Georgia because I do think that he gives them something they don't really have right now. You know, I think he's Dominic Lovett, but better, like in terms of the role that they're probably planning on for him. And they don't have another guy really on that roster that can do that right now. So I do think that he'll play a little bit as a freshman, or at least enough to kind of check some of the boxes that we're hoping for. Other than that, on this team, you know, looking at Lockett, he didn't get a ton of targets. He had one that I thought maybe he should have had that was back shoulder, and I think the first quarter. But it seemed like the timing was a little bit off on the play, so I didn't really blame him on it. I don't remember hearing Andrew Marsh's name really at all, and that was one that I was kind of hoping to hear more as the purported top dog in the Michigan class and tied to Bryce Underwood. We're kind of hoping to see should we be drafting somebody here from Michigan or maybe not. So that was a little bit of a bummer for me. I didn't really hear Dalen McCutcheon's name at all on this one either. Didn't have any notes down for him. So overall, just kind of disappointing in terms of getting some of these receivers involved. And like I said, we talked about, you know, Grubbs was not good. Henderson hit Cooper on that one deep one, but that was really all Cooper did.
Yeah.
So like that was, I'm not a Cooper guy. I don't think he's a draftable player at this juncture. So I don't think I'm changing my opinion on that at all. So I mean, yeah, just overall didn't have a lot of interesting notes on anybody in this group.
Yeah, I mean, and the one thing with Cooper too, which we were talking about pre-show, and they mentioned it on during the game in an interview that they played 7-on-7 together. It looked like Cooper broke off of his route to go deep when he saw Henderson scramble out of the pocket and was wide open. It was like broken coverage because Henderson even said it in the interview. He's like, yeah, he's supposed to, I believe he said it was a curl. He's like, he's supposed to run a curl route. And then I just saw him running wide open down the field. So clearly it looked like Cooper just kind of broke off when he saw Henderson break out of the pocket, which is, you know, fine when you have that chemistry with a player like they do playing 7-on-7s that you can do that. But overall, I agree with you on that. Andrew Marsh had, so I could be 100%. I feel I have one target, and it was when Grubbs was playing, and it was like nowhere near him. Outside of that, I didn't see or hear. I heard him talk about him on the broadcast a little bit. I don't remember him doing anything. I can't remember what. I wish I would have wrote it down. There was something McCutcheon did, not in a good way, but I believe he was targeted a couple times, just couldn't come up with the catches. I don't remember if it was Grubbs. I think there was one throw from Adamson that he dropped. But then outside of that, I'm with you. Like, there wasn't anything to take away from this. I was really hoping to see more of Khalil Lockett just because, again, it seems like he's kind of becoming the guy. So I've been lower on him than I believe the rest of our recruiting team. And I've kind of been like, I think Jamie French is going to be the guy. And it really sounds like Khalil Lockett is, at least for most other services and you guys, kind of becoming that number one. I was kind of hoping to see more out of him. It would have been nice to see a little bit of Andrew Marsh. But again, I think, as you mentioned, the West team was kind of limited here. I mean, Grubbs, we don't want to keep beating up on this kid. It just was not particularly good. But again, 2026 kid, like, we got to give him time. He could have a really great senior season and completely flip that around. Just right now was not super impressive. And again, Henderson is an athlete. Like, you could see it in watching that game that he's not the most polished quarterback prospect either. So how much that hurt those wide receivers, is kind of hard to tell.
The other thing is, I don't know why they did it this way. They were rotating them every series. I don't know why they didn't just give them all like a quarter or whatever.
Yeah, that part.
Because I think you give them a 2 or 3 drives back to back to kind of get some chemistry, get into the speed of the game and all of that kind of stuff. They were rotating them every single drive.
Yeah,
which just made no sense to me. And I think kind of killed a little bit of the flow of the game as well. So was a bit of a bummer. There's one guy actually on the East team that we did not talk about, a receiver that apparently had a big week. I just wanted to mention his name, Bradley Martino, who's going to Minnesota. Apparently looked pretty good in the 7v7s and stuff. I thought he looked fine from what I was watching. And he was not on my radar. So I sat down and gave him a grade. Graded out wide receiver 37 for me. Draftable in startups, but not in supplemental drafts for this year. Kind of just tough to trust a true freshman going to Minnesota, and we don't really know what that offense is going to look like, what the quarterback situation is. I mean, we do, but we don't know if it's positive or negative yet. So, but he's kind of a tall, skinny, lanky, springy guy. I have a hard time coming up with a really good comp for him that would be somebody that would sound positive, but I do think there are a lot of really interesting tools there. He's super, super fluid as an athlete. Really, if you watch him, he's running just like double moves and stuff. So like he really needs to round out his game. But from like ball skills, from movement skills, from kind of understanding of the wide receiver position, he looked pretty interesting to me. So I'll probably end up snagging him maybe late in a couple of drafts this offseason. And he did have, I believe, one catch in this game as well. So it didn't have a huge impact, but none of the receivers did.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say from the last couple of years, I could have swore they gave each quarterback, it was two or three drives, and then they switched them. Like I remember a couple of years ago, because it was the DeMond Williams. That was last year, right? DeMond Williams had like 2 or 3 drives before they switched the quarterbacks out. And a couple of years ago, too, it's the same thing with like, I remember Austin Novosek, like his first drive was not good at all. And then he went back out there for another couple, and then they switched him. It just make more sense. I agree with you to do that, to give them a little bit of pulling them in and out each drive is not great. Really quick before we, anything else on the West team? And I want to ask you a question about Adamson.
No, I don't think so. That was all that I have in my notes.
Are you worried at all about how good Philo looked this year for Georgia Tech?
I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I won't necessarily put a lot of stock in a guy that made such a such minimal appearances throughout the season for them. But I think it'll be a battle. But we'll see. And I have Adamson actually graded same grade as Antoine Hill, like I said, and one spot above Ty Hawkins. But I actually have those guys, funny enough, 15, 16, 17 in my ranking. So it was interesting seeing them all in this game, and none of them performed particularly well, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, it was a little bit of a letdown offensively for the All-Star game there.
There was not a lot of good talent in this game. And I think, again, we've talked about this. This is not a particularly strong class. And there are 2 All-Star games. So not all of them can go to this one. But they had a dude who's going to Navy. And I was like, oh, maybe Navy, they had a good year. They got a good recruit in there. He's like, or they were like, oh, he's end 143 or something in the composite. And I was like, why is he here? Outside of the fact that maybe he's going to Navy, and since they're sponsoring the event, they had him there. Like I don't know how they made some of the decisions on this, but I thought there was some questionable roster decisions there.
Yep. No, I agree with you. I think it does kind of, symbolize what we think of the overall class. And Alan True of 24/7 Sports kind of said the same thing when we had him on Wednesday. We had a long discussion about what we think about this class, and it really seems like the biggest and best part of this class is the quarterbacks, and really they did not even have any of those top names there. Again, in my opinion, the best quarterback was Henderson. He's a 2026 guy and not even listed a quarterback yet. So we'll see what happens with the rest of this offseason. Again, make sure to pay attention to everything we're doing here. Oh, go ahead.
How much stock do you put into these games, Matt? If you've got a guy ranked well or vice versa, and they perform the opposite of kind of what you thought of them coming into the game, what does that do for you when you're kind of finishing up some of our grading and our rankings here with the guide coming out March 1st? That's when we freeze all our grades. We don't adjust anything after that.
So I feel like I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here. I don't let it affect me too much. You talked about Rayshawn Luke earlier, and using him as an example, I remember a couple of years ago when we had him, we were like, we just didn't have him graded very highly, and he goes off in that game. I believe he had like a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown. That one just was he's an explosive athlete. And everybody was talking about how this is going to be like the next best kid, and we were all kind of like, nah, we're not that high on him. I try not to, but the one biggest takeaway I did was the Ty Hawkins thing for me, just because, again, when you can't, how do I want to word this? When the way you've put it so far, I think is fair, and that we don't want to be too negative on this because again, there's only a week of practice. We don't know how like wide open these playbooks are, how if even some of these kids run these systems, because a lot of times you have NFL coaches or college coaches coming in and coaching these games. But when you miss wide open receivers like that, that's the part where I'm kind of like, that's bad. Like, that's bad. I go more on the practices because it feels like those are more important. And so, like, in some of the things that I've heard about Jamie French this week, I'm going to go back and look at and just kind of see if maybe what am I missing kind of thing. But I try not to knock too much. I think it's just more of another step in the process of trying to figure out exactly how I want to firm these guys up and kind of give my solidified grades. Because again, we're coming to that point where we have to, this is it, we're put it in. And again, it's not I don't know how any of the other services do it. We do it as a group thing and we're kind of like, hey, this is it. And we go based on our group grades and that goes in and then it's solidified and it's done. Even though we have arguments every single year about what we think of different players and whatnot. It's what I love about doing this with you guys is like, that's where we get some of our hits because some of you guys have been like, hey, no, this guy. And all of us like, no, you're dead wrong. And then they end up being right. But because of someone on the team being so passionate about having this player there, they get to go up there. And again, I think it's just a process. So I don't take it. It's not the end all be all, but I do think it has to be part of your thought process. How do you evaluate it?
The only thing that I adjust on is if a receiver looks really bad in practice. And I don't really necessarily flip the opposite way because I think like in against air or whatever, these wide receivers, just corners, the receiver should be winning. We talk about this all the time in the context of the Senior Bowl and stuff. This guy's going to go to the Senior Bowl and he's going to look really good because of just being able to be 1v1 all the time in the world against these corners. But in reality, maybe they're not a great football player within context, within a proper offensive setting. So I don't necessarily bump guys up if they look really good throughout the week. A guy like Terry Bussey was a guy like that last year that was really good in the drills. And I might have moved him a couple of spots, but really didn't adjust him that much. But if you're bad, I will drop you. I think you just have to. I think, again, these are kind of layups. If you're not really creating any separation, especially for a guy, like I said, I dropped French from like wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 12. And just because he's the kind of guy that's like, I've comped him a little bit to Carnell Tate, but a guy that I thought could be a little more dynamic after the catch. Like that's the kind of guy that should excel in that sort of setting. Yeah. And I think back last year, the past couple of years, a guy like Mylan Graham, who we talked about, level of competition, how good is this kid? He's a really dynamic athlete, looks really good in all his highlights. They put him out there and the dude couldn't get open. And then I realized it was Ohio State this year, but he didn't really play at all. So, and for what we're doing here in the context of scouting these guys for the future, for Canton leagues, et cetera, like we know that if you come in and you can't touch the field as a freshman at the wide receiver position, it's basically a death sentence for you as it relates to getting to the NFL and getting good draft capital and being productive and kind of achieving all those sort of things. So, yeah, I'm pretty worried about French. I've dropped him a little bit. And conversely, I bumped Taylor up a couple points. Mm-hmm. He looked really good, was good in this game. I might actually even bump him up a couple more points. He's like right behind Lotier Brooks and Burnell Brown for me. It's literally just like a couple of like 0.00 tenths, or I guess that's 100th of a point. Yeah. Like I might bump him up a couple of hundredths to get him above those guys because I thought he was really good this week. And he's another guy that like level of comp was real average. Wasn't really sure about the Georgia landing spot. Wasn't really sure about how he would adapt to kind of this sort of climate. And he, I think, kind of checked a lot of those boxes and answered some of those questions for me. And then I actually did bump up Quincy Porter a few points as well. He is my guy this year. There's one in every class. I'm just going to trust. I'm going to trust this, the All-Star game stuff. I'm going to trust what the quote unquote pros are saying because I do not see it, but I'm going to put my faith in all of these factors and bump him up. And it's worked out sometimes. It's burned me a couple times, but I'm going to do it here with Porter. He's kind of going to be that guy for me this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy that I know Ohio State really likes. They would have, I'm sure, like Taven St. Clair was at the game last night. I'm sure they'd have loved him to be there as well, but obviously had to get ready for the All-Star game and everything. But no, I think that's fair. I mean, especially with, as you mentioned, a guy like French who wasn't playing the toughest competition. I believe is it Mandarin, Florida is where he goes to high school, not playing the toughest competition. It's still fairly decent, one of the better states in all of high school football, but not one of the higher end, like Khalid Lockett was playing. And among some other, I think, there was someone else. Now I can't remember who it was that's been playing some very good competition. But when you see them going up against some of these better defensive players and them really struggle, you start to wonder if we just use Milan Graham. There's been others in every class, obviously, as well, that we've seen play weaker competition in the high school level. And then when they get up against those better players, just kind of not be able to produce the way that they have against that weaker competition. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. We got one more, right? Isn't the, or they not do what's the one that Nico and all them were in a couple of years ago, Malachi Coleman. That's
the Polynesian Bowl, right?
I believe so. I was thinking it was something else, but that probably is what
I think that's a Polynesian Bowl. And let's see here. Polynesian Bowl 2025. Well, it comes up when you search it, so that's promising. Yeah, there is that one. I don't have a date on it, and let me just look and see if there's any interesting players that we've kind of already looked at that are playing in this one. Desan Brom, the tight end, going to Tennessee, is in this one. Let's see here. Devin Carter is also playing in that one. Carson Cox, the running back, is going to UCLA, who I think we're a fan of. He's headed to that one. So I mean, there's some names to be on the lookout for. Antoine Hill is playing in that one as well. Tanook Hines, USC wide receiver. Madden Iamalieva, I guess that makes sense. His brother played in it. Yeah. There's some guys there that we're interested in. So Micah Matthews. Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I'll definitely be tuning into that too.
And when is that one?
Yeah, I'm looking right now. It is Friday, January 17th. So this Friday. So cool.
Interesting. All right, cool. Yeah, so we'll be on the lookout for that. I don't know if we'll do a show, but I'm sure we'll have some kind of write-up or something on that Bowl All-Star game as well to recap it. But make sure to keep your eyes locked in here at Camps to Camp. Remember, hit that bell icon so you don't miss any of our shows, live shows, or videos as we put up, and we will talk to you guys again soon.